US President Donald Trump ordered a royal guard to salute him. But the guard's response? He didn't raise a hand. He didn't even look in Trump's direction. And what happened next left the entire palace dead silent. And reminded a former president in no uncertain terms, this isn't America. Want to know exactly how it unfolded? First, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. You know that particular kind of London afternoon where the sky's this perfect shade of grey and there's just enough breeze to make the Union Jack snap lazily against its pole? That's exactly what it was like when the sleek convoy of jet black SUVs came rolling through those massive wrought iron gates of Buckingham Palace. The vehicles had that unmistakable American diplomatic look. Tinted windows darker than sunglasses, reinforced plating thick enough to stop a small missile, and that subtle but unmistakable air of, we're very important people inside here. Along the barriers, tourists were already lifting their phones, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was significant enough to roll up to the palace like they owned the place. Then the door opens and out steps Donald Trump. Now, at 78, the man still carries himself with all the subtle grace of a bulldozer in a china shop. Navy overcoat, perfectly pressed. That signature red tie catching the light. And he's adjusting his collar while scanning the courtyard, with the expression of someone who's mentally calculating how much all this real estate would be worth if you just bulldozed it and put up condos. Still doing the whole medieval cosplay thing, huh? He says to one of his aides. And yeah, he says it loud enough for the nearby palace staff to hear every word. You'd think with all this real estate they'd modernise a little, maybe bring in some actual security instead of guys in Halloween costumes. The British diplomatic staff exchange those perfectly polite but deeply strained glances that only come from years of dealing with challenging international guests. Nobody corrects him. Nobody even acknowledges the comment. They just keep doing their jobs with that distinctly British ability to remain professional while internally screaming, "Ido." Now, across that expansive gravel courtyard, you know, the kind that crunches satisfyingly under your feet and probably costs more per square foot than most people's houses, stands Warrant Officer Jonathan Parr, 38 years old, absolutely motionless at his ceremonial post. And when I say motionless, I mean the guy could give lessons to actual statues. His crimson tunic is pressed so sharp, you could probably cut yourself on the creases. His boots are polished to a mirror shine that's reflecting the grey sky. And his eyes are fixed straight ahead with that 1,000-yard stare that only comes from serious military training. But here's what Trump doesn't know, and what most tourists never realise about this particular guy in a costume. Parr isn't just some ceremonial decoration. This man served with distinction during joint UN operations in Syria. We're talking convoy extractions in hostile zones, corridor security when things got ugly, the kind of deployment where keeping your head down literally means the difference between coming home or not. He'd been commended for maintaining his position during a mortar strike outside Aleppo, and we're not talking about a brief shower of fireworks here. This was a sustained attack, and Parr refused to abandon his post until every single civilian in a supply convoy was safely evacuated. His citation praised an exceptional display of composed bravery under fire. The kind of composure that doesn't just happen, it gets forged in places where silence can mean survival and discipline can save lives. So when Trump's gaze lands on him across that courtyard, he's not looking at some theatrical prop. He's looking at a combat veteran who's forgotten more about real discipline than most people ever learn. That one, Trump says, gesturing toward Parr with the kind of casual point you'd use to select a menu item. Let's see if he knows who's boss. His aide looks up sharply, probably already calculating how many apology calls this is going to require. Sir, this isn't part of the schedule. But Trump's already moving, striding off the designated visitor pathway with that signature swagger that suggests he's never met a boundary he couldn't simply pretend didn't exist. Behind the rope barriers, you can actually see the tourists' phones rising like some synchronized digital ballet, because everyone can sense it. Something's about to go sideways and nobody wants to miss it. Trump brushes past a diplomatic attaché who instinctively reaches out to redirect him, then thinks better of it. I mean, what are you going to do? Physically restrain a former US president in front of 50 cameras? That's a career-ending move right there. Sir, if you could remain with the tour group, calls one of the British liaisons, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone trying to be helpful while internally preparing for disaster. Trump doesn't even glance back. "Relax, sweetheart, I'm just saying hello." A Secret Service agent moves to shadow him, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Behind them, one of Trump's personal aides is already mouthing apologies to an increasingly flustered palace official. And those phones? They're all recording now because everyone in that crowd can sense that whatever's about to happen, it's going to be the kind of thing you tell stories about. Trump approaches Warrant Officer Parr with the casual confidence of a man who's spent his entire life expecting doors to open and people to step aside. He stops just a few feet away, close enough to make it personal, far enough to maintain plausible deniability, and folds his arms like he's inspecting a used car. "Now that," he announces, projecting his voice for the benefit of the growing audience, "is some outfit. Tremendous, very theatrical. Who's the costume designer? Is it someone from that Bridgerton show?" A few of his entourage manage these forced, uncomfortable chuckles, the kind of laughter that says, "I have to laugh because he's my boss, but this is deeply awkward." Parr doesn't blink, not even a flutter. Trump smirks, taking another half step forward, moving into that space that every tourist knows you're not supposed to enter. "You know, in the States, soldiers salute their commanders. I've been saluted by generals, Marines, Navy guys, you name it. Even got a salute from a French colonel once, and trust me, that's not easy to get." He actually mimics a stiff military posture, raising his hand in this exaggerated mock salute that would be funny if it weren't so deeply inappropriate. "You salute your president, don't you?" Trump continues, cocking his head with that expression of someone who thinks he's being clever. "Well, I'm a president. Still am to a lot of people. So go ahead. Show the people some respect. That's an order." The crowd freezes. You can actually feel it. That moment when casual curiosity transforms into something much more uncomfortable. Phones are still up, but the expressions behind them have shifted from amusement to something closer to concern. Parr's face reveals absolutely nothing. Not defiance, not confusion, not irritation. It's like looking at a perfectly composed mask of professional discipline. If he's registered Trump's presence at all, there's no external sign of it. A few tourists lower their phones slightly, their faces showing that dawning realization that they might be witnessing something they'd rather not see. Trump's aide steps closer, murmuring, "Sir, he's not supposed to—" "Shh." Trump waves him off, without breaking eye contact with the motionless guard. "He heard me." He leans in slightly, lowering his voice, but not quite whispering. "Come on, just a little salute. You want to make an ally feel respected, don't you?" Near the rope barrier, a small British girl tugs on her mum's coat with that insistent urgency only children can manage. "Mum, is that man allowed to talk to the soldier like that?" Her mother doesn't respond immediately. When she does, her voice carries that careful tone parents use when they're trying to explain something complicated to a child. "No, sweetheart, but some people think rules don't apply to them." Parr remains perfectly still, rifle held at precisely the correct angle, eyes locked on that distant point that guards are trained to focus on. It's not that he's ignoring Trump. It's that maintaining his post requires a level of focus that transcends whatever's happening in his immediate vicinity. Trump turns slightly toward the crowd, arms raised in that "can you believe this" gesture that's become his trademark. What, nothing? Is he frozen? Is this guy on strike or something? An American tourist, probably trying to be helpful, calls out, "He's not going to move, sir." That's kind of the whole point. Trump glances back at Parr, and for the first time, you can see genuine irritation starting to creep around the edges of his practiced showmanship. The smirk wavers just slightly. "You think you're better than me? You think this uniform makes you untouchable?" His voice drops to something closer to a growl. "I said salute me. Now, nothing. Not a blink, not the slightest shift in posture. And suddenly, what started as a performance has become something else entirely. The crowd has shifted, gone from amused onlookers to increasingly uncomfortable witnesses. Some people are turning their phones off completely. The laughter has completely died. Parr hasn't moved a muscle, hasn't said a word, hasn't even acknowledged that anything unusual is happening. And yet, somehow, in that perfect stillness, he has just reminded everyone present, without uttering a single syllable, exactly where the boundaries are, and exactly what happens when someone who's used to getting their way meets someone who simply won't. The tension in that courtyard is so thick you could practically slice it with a ceremonial sword. Trump is still standing there, maybe 3 feet from Warrant Officer Parr, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. Any reaction. But he's getting nothing. Absolutely nothing. "This guy's something else," Trump mutters, shaking his head with that exaggerated grin that doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. "I've had Marines salute me on 5 continents. Got a standing ovation from the Israeli Knesset. This guy can't even blink." He starts circling slowly, hands clasped behind his back, like he's a drill instructor inspecting a particularly stubborn recruit. "How do you people keep a straight face doing this all day? Don't you get tired of pretending you're statues?" Parr maintains that perfect forward gaze, unmoved as granite. From somewhere in the crowd, you hear this quiet voice. An older gentleman, maybe in his 60s, wearing a faded navy blazer with a small poppy pin on the lapel. He speaks just loud enough for the people around him to hear, but there's something in his tone that makes others lean in to listen. "That one's been to Syria twice," he says, nodding subtly toward the motionless guard. "Held a corridor while civilians evacuated under sniper fire. He's not pretending." A schoolboy, can't be more than 10 or 11, tugs on the man's sleeve. "Who's that orange man yelling at the soldier?" The veteran looks down at the kid, then back at the scene unfolding in front of them. A loud voice trying to get attention from someone who earned his the hard way. You can see it rippling through the crowd now. That shift when people start to really understand what they're watching. The phones are still up, but nobody's smiling through their screens anymore. The atmosphere has changed from curious entertainment to something much more serious, much more uncomfortable. Trump's aide checks his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes, his eyes constantly scanning the growing crowd of onlookers. They're not laughing anymore, and you can practically see him calculating how badly this could go viral. "You're not saluting because of politics?" Trump continues, his voice now carrying a sharper edge. "Because I wasn't your guy." Still nothing from Parr. "Or is it ego? You think you're better than me, standing there like that?" The silence stretches and stretches until it becomes its own kind of answer. An American woman near the back of the crowd shakes her head slowly, speaking to no one in particular, but loud enough for several people to hear. "He doesn't think he's better. He just knows he's not lesser." Someone else murmurs, "This is painful to watch." And it is, because what started as Trump trying to assert dominance has become something else entirely. He's clearly growing more agitated, his voice losing that performative bravado and taking on the crack of real irritation. "You're a soldier, aren't you?" he demands, stepping even closer to the line he shouldn't cross. "You follow orders? I just gave you one." The silence that follows isn't passive anymore, it's not empty. It's active resistance, in its purest, quietest form. The kind that doesn't need fists or shouting or grand gestures. It just needs presence, composure, the absolute refusal to be moved by bluster. A teenage girl whispers to her friend, "Why doesn't he just leave?" "Because he's losing," comes the answer, and he knows it. For the first time in the entire exchange, Trump hesitates. His eyes flick toward the crowd, and what he sees there probably isn't what he was expecting. Their expressions have turned stone serious. Some look embarrassed. For him, some look angry at him. None look amused anymore. He tries to recover, throwing up his arms in that exaggerated gesture of exasperation. "Well, I guess he's above even a presidential order. Maybe we'll see if the king himself gets more respect." But the joke falls completely flat. No one laughs. No one even smiles. Because they all understand something Trump apparently doesn't. Warrant Officer Jonathan Parr isn't being disrespectful. He's being disciplined. He's following protocol that's existed for centuries. Protocol that doesn't bend for anyone, regardless of their title or their ego or their expectation of deference. And the power of that discipline, of standing absolutely still when every camera, every insult and every provocation is trying to pull you off course, is slowly filling the entire courtyard like floodwater. Trump is still talking, still gesturing, still trying to command the moment. But no one's really listening anymore. They're watching Parr, the man who hasn't moved, the man who won't be moved. And for maybe the first time in his entire public life, the man who always demands attention doesn't have it. The sound that cuts through the tension is unmistakable. The crisp rhythm of polished military boots against flagstone. Everyone turns to see a tall woman in an impeccably pressed navy uniform emerging from the palace side gate, moving with that particular kind of measured urgency that suggests someone in authority has decided things have gone quite far enough. Major Caroline Brooks, Royal Household Protocol Office. If you've ever wondered what quiet authority looks like, she's basically the textbook definition. Tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of bearing that comes from decades of managing situations exactly like this one, where politics meets protocol and somebody needs to gently but firmly remind everyone where the lines are. She approaches Trump with the practiced ease of someone who's dealt with difficult heads of state before, offering a polite but unmistakably firm nod. "Mr. Trump," she says, her voice carrying that distinctly British quality of being perfectly courteous, while simultaneously brooking absolutely no argument. "I'm Major Brooks. On behalf of the royal household, I must ask that you return to the designated viewing path." Trump flashes one of his trademark grins and points toward Parr without actually looking at him. "Just admiring the setup here, Major. Great costumes, amazing posture. You should see how quickly my Secret Service guys salute when I walk past." Brooks doesn't even blink. "Sir, the Coldstream Guards are not actors. They are serving members of His Majesty's Armed Forces. This area is an active ceremonial post, and your proximity violates standing protocol." "Standing protocol?" Trump's eyebrows go up, like he's genuinely amused by the concept. "I've been saluted by kings and generals, Major. Don't tell me I can't talk to a man in a bearskin hat." She meets his gaze directly, steady and clear as glass. "And yet, none of them needed to be told twice, sir." Boom. Just like that. No raised voice, no dramatic gesture, just a simple statement that lands like a precision-guided missile. The crowd around them goes dead quiet. You can actually hear someone's sharp intake of breath. A barely audible oof ripples through the onlookers. Trump tries to laugh it off, gesturing broadly toward the palace with both arms. "You know, I've always liked this place. Tremendous architecture. I even had tea with the Queen once. Tremendous lady. I told her this would be a great place for golf if you flattened the back garden and put in 18 holes." Major Brooks's expression doesn't shift by even a millimeter. "This isn't a golf course, Mr. Trump." That gets an actual chuckle from the crowd. Not with him, but decidedly at him. And you can see it the register on his face. That moment when someone who's used to controlling the room realizes the room has turned. He pivots back toward Parr, clearly still rankled by the guard's continued silence. "All I said was salute me. You'd think I insulted the crown jewels or something. You instructed a British soldier to break formation on royal ground," Brooks says, her tone never shifting from that perfectly professional register, but with each word carrying the weight of steel wrapped in silk. "In our tradition, service is to the crown, not to personalities." Trump's mouth opens, then closes. His aide steps closer, whispering something urgent near his shoulder. He waves the man off with visible irritation. All right, Trump mutters, taking half a step back, the first retreat he's made all afternoon. "Didn't realize you all were so sensitive about your mannequins." Brooks doesn't respond to the insult. Her silence isn't wounded pride. It's protocol. Professional discipline that doesn't need to defend itself because it simply is. And behind her, Warrant Officer Parr still hasn't moved. Still hasn't acknowledged any of this. Still stands like he's carved from the very stones of the palace himself. The crowd has shifted again. A middle-aged man, probably a teacher, judging by his patient demeanour with the group of teenagers around him, leans down to one of his students. "That guard just won more respect standing still than most people get shouting on a stage," he murmurs. The teenager nods, eyes still fixed on Parr. "He didn't even say a word." Trump casts one more glance around the courtyard, maybe trying to salvage something from this moment. But the stage has completely turned. The tourists aren't looking at him anymore. They're not hanging on his words or waiting for his next move. They're watching the guard, the man who didn't flinch, the man who wouldn't be moved, and the officer who didn't need to raise her voice to make her point. Somewhere in the crowd, you hear a whispered, "He held the line." Another voice follows, "And never even looked him in the eye." The moment no longer belongs to Trump. He stepped into a tradition that doesn't bow, doesn't bend, and definitely doesn't salute on demand. And now he's standing in the middle of it, realizing that for all his bluster and expectation and practiced dominance, some things simply won't be moved. You can feel it in the air, that electric tension of a confrontation that's reached its absolute breaking point. Trump is standing there, just beyond where Major Brooks intercepted him, still within clear view of Warrant Officer Parr. His aides hover behind him like nervous birds, not saying a word. Even the Secret Service agents have that particular look of professionals who just want this moment to be over so they can all go home. But Trump, he's not finished, not yet. He turns back toward the guard with one final attempt at reclaiming control of this situation. "You know something," he says, projecting his voice for the entire courtyard to hear. "I made NATO pay up. Billions of dollars. I did more for your army than your own prime ministers ever did." There's a ripple through the crowd. Some heads turn. A few tourists instinctively look to Major Brooks, but she remains perfectly still, letting the moment play out. Trump steps closer again, not crossing the line this time, but standing right at the very edge of it, defiant and unyielding. That's real power. That's leadership. So show me some respect. Salute your ally. Pa doesn't blink, doesn't twitch, doesn't acknowledge the demand any more than he has all the previous ones. And then, finally, he moves. It's not dramatic, it's not performative, it's not angry, it's just decisive. Pa's right hand shifts on his rifle, lifting it just slightly in a formal repositioning. Not breaking discipline, not abandoning his post, just a subtle, practiced adjustment that any military observer would recognize as a closing gesture. A soldier's way of saying, "This interaction is finished," and then he speaks. One line, firm, unwavering, delivered without ever breaking that ceremonial forward stare. "This uniform doesn't answer to ego." The words hit the courtyard like a thunderclap in perfect silence. You can literally hear the collective breath leave the crowd. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be loud. It's delivered with the same calm precision that Pa has maintained throughout this entire ordeal. But it completely shatters every assumption Trump has made about this moment. Trump's mouth opens to respond, but no sound comes out. For the first time all afternoon, his expression changes. Not into fury, not into offense, but into something else entirely. Something that might almost be recognition. Not admiration, not respect, but the faint, grudging understanding that he has just run headlong into something bigger than himself. Behind the rope barrier, a young boy, maybe 9 or 10, raises his small hand to his forehead in an uncertain little salute. He doesn't fully understand what he's witnessed, but he's seen something in that guard that speaks to him, something worth honoring the only way he knows how. Then another child does the same. Then their mother. Then the old Welsh veteran who spoke up earlier. Then 2 American tourists who have been filming, quietly lowering their phones and straightening their backs. One by one, people along the rope line turn their bodies toward the guard. Not to gawk, not to film, not to judge, but to acknowledge. To participate in something larger than celebrity and spectacle. To stand still, to offer their own silence back to the man who has wielded his with more power than any podium ever provided. Pa doesn't look at them. His duty isn't to public opinion or crowd approval, but the tourists no longer need his attention. They've learned something from his example, and they're following his lead. And Trump? For the first time in perhaps decades, he says nothing. His hands, which have been gesturing and animated throughout this entire encounter, slowly drop to his sides. He looks around the courtyard, scanning the faces of the people watching, not for applause, not for approval, but trying to assess something he clearly hadn't expected. He's no longer the center of this moment. The man he tried to command has, through pure silence and unwavering discipline, taken the entire courtyard with him. Major Brooks takes a slow, measured breath and nods toward Trump's aides. One of them steps forward and whispers, "Mr. Trump, we should return to the motorcade." This time he doesn't argue, he doesn't protest. He doesn't demand one more chance to make his point. He simply turns and begins walking back toward the palace gates, his entourage falling into step behind him. But here's the thing, as he walks away, the stillness doesn't break. No one boos, no one mocks, no one cheers. But no one follows either. He walks alone, surrounded by the most powerful sound in the world, the silence of a man who refused to be moved. The echo of Trump's leather soles on stone fades gradually as he makes his way back across the courtyard. Each step sounding somehow smaller than the last, like punctuation marks on a sentence that's already ended. His aides trail behind him at a respectful distance, eyes carefully averted from the crowd. Even the Secret Service agents look subdued, no longer part of a grand performance, but simply there to facilitate a quiet exit. The atmosphere is extraordinary. Nobody applauds, nobody jeers, but nobody turns away either. It's the kind of profound quiet that doesn't need stage directions or explanation. It holds its own weight, like the pause between a judge's final words and the fall of the gavel. Behind them, Warrant Officer Jonathan Parr has resumed his perfect stillness, rifle at precisely the regulation angle, eyes fixed on that distant point that guards are trained to focus on. To anyone arriving now, he might appear to have been standing exactly like this all along, untouched by drama, unbothered by spectacle. But everyone present knows better. They've witnessed something that can't be captured in a quick photo or a viral video clip. As Trump passes the front ranks of tourists, he doesn't acknowledge them. No nods, no waves, no final attempts at connection. Maybe he understands that such gestures wouldn't be returned. Maybe he's finally grasped that this crowd has found something more compelling to focus on. Some of the onlookers still stand with their hands raised in impromptu salutes. Others simply maintain straight backs and solemn faces, as if they've become part of something ceremonial themselves. No one is filming anymore. The phones have been lowered or turned off entirely. Whatever this moment has become, it's too significant for casual recording. They're not documenting, they're participating. Trump reaches the waiting motorcade. His lead aide opens the car door with practiced efficiency. But Trump pauses before getting in. He turns back just once, for just a moment. The entire courtyard remains frozen in that quiet tribute. Faces turn not towards him, but toward the figure in red, who taught them something about strength without words. He takes one final look at Parr. The guard hasn't moved. Not for the spectacle, not for the silence, not for the cameras or the crowd, or the former President of the United States. And that immobility, that absolute refusal to be anything other than what duty requires, might be what unsettles Trump most of all. He ducks into the vehicle without another word. The door closes with a soft, final thud. Moments later, the convoy begins its departure, tires whispering against ancient stone as it glides back through the palace gates and disappears into London traffic. But in the courtyard, nothing changes. The tourists remain where they are. The silence holds. Some people have tears in their eyes, though they might not be able to explain exactly why. Others are simply quiet, processing something they've never quite experienced before. The changing of the guard ceremony continues its precise choreography. Heavy drums beat their measured rhythm. Pristine boots march in perfect unison. The flowing river of scarlet and steel moves forward with centuries of tradition behind every step. Parr maintains his post until his exact moment arrives. And when it does, he marches off with the same flawless precision. No acknowledgement of what transpired, no glances toward the crowd, no suggestion that anything unusual occurred. He simply executes his duty and disappears beneath the palace archway, leaving behind a courtyard full of people who will never quite look at strength the same way again. As he vanishes from view, the spectators don't cheer or celebrate. They don't need dramatic gestures or grand finales. They just stand. And in that standing, they've learned something profound about the difference between demanding respect and earning it. A teenage girl near the front whispers to her companion, "He didn't even blink." An American woman murmurs, "That's the first time I've ever seen him lose an argument." Her husband replies quietly, "No, that's the first time I've seen him realize he was never really in the conversation." And then, as if released from a spell, the courtyard slowly begins to breathe again. Phones emerge from pockets. Whispers become conversations. The tourists gradually disperse, but they move differently now, more thoughtfully, more quietly. Because not one person who witnessed this encounter will leave Buckingham Palace thinking the same way they did when they arrived. They've seen something that can't be taught in leadership seminars or political science classes. They've seen what happens when real discipline meets manufactured authority. They've learned that the most powerful response to demands isn't always a response at all. They've discovered that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to move. So what do you think? When someone demands respect they haven't earned, should you give it to them anyway? Or should you stand your ground the way Warrant Officer Parr did in front of the entire world? And here's maybe the bigger question. In our age of social media and instant reactions, is there still power in choosing silence over spectacle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely read every single one, and these conversations matter more than you might think. If this moment moved something in you, if it made you think about respect and discipline in a new way, hit that like button. It honestly helps more than you know. Make sure to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss our daily stories about the incredible men and women who guard these traditions. And if you know someone who could use a reminder about what real strength looks like, someone who thinks power means making noise until people pay attention, share this video with them. Our next Royal Guard story is already waiting on your screen. Click it now, and we'll see you tomorrow with another moment that proves the same truth over and over again. Real authority doesn't demand recognition. It simply stands. And when it does, even the loudest voices in the world discover they have nothing left to say.